and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Oh, it's Friday the 6th of February. And I was going to start off with two topics this first half hour. I think I'm going to go ahead and switch that around so I can fix something here. I need to go through and fix a couple things real quick. I'm going to start off, which this was going to come the second half of the first hour, but I'm going to go ahead and start it now. And this one is Dr. Peter Steinmetz, leading firearms civil disobedience in Arizona. And Adam Kokesh interviewed him. And this was something that did not start off for Dr. Peter Steinmetz as civil disobedience, but or any type of activism. But this is what it turned into, and it's because of what he encountered. And, well, I'll just let you listen to it, and we'll get into it after this clip. It's a little long. I might stop it short. But things like this are examples of when we talk about it, it has to affect someone before they'll wake up to it, or, actually become involved in changing something. It first has to affect them. And this is kind of an example of that. And that's not all cases. There's some people that will see it and realize it. Those are people that are more in tune to notice injustice according to their ideology, philosophy, theology, if that may be the case. So, it's one of those things, though. There's going to be groups of people that will not just accept something until it's affecting them. Then they'll realize. And in this case, it was more waking up to the fact that I need to act to make change because people are not seeing what I'm seeing. And we'll just go ahead and get into this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be joined tonight by one Peter Steinmetz, a Phoenix area neural researcher who also happens to be leading the charge for firearms rights in the state of Arizona. And you might think, Arizona, constitutional carry state, why do you need firearms activism? Well, the kind of activism that Peter is engaged with gets right to the core of the fears that are behind gun control. And he's done some really incredible things and really taken some exciting risks in order to address and reveal some of those fears and the deeper issues behind gun control. Peter, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure, Adam. Thanks for having me.
So the most recent incident of you really stepping things up was carrying an AR-15 into the departures area at the Phoenix airport. And I mean, it's exciting to see that people are taking this kind of activism on and really making sure that the basic issues of gun control are confronted. What led you to this decision and made you believe, first of all, that this particular act was going to be effective in addressing those fears?
Well, I had previously, actually, the previous Novembers, been to the airport, actually, with my AR-15, somewhat incidentally, in a sense, because I was just there to pick up my wife, and I happened to have been out shooting in the desert with my son, and we had a better time than we thought we were going to. And what happened was we had to go directly to the airport. I didn't want to leave my guns in the car. I knew it was legal to carry them into the airport, so I told my son, okay, we're going to carry them in. And at this point, during this time, I was not arrested. It really didn't make too big a deal. But I felt that the police, in a sense, and other people were, sort of trying to intimidate me, right, about just, doing something perfectly legal, well within my Second Amendment rights. So the following summer, July 20...
Hold on a second. I want to get into this because this really gets to the heart of it. When you say trying to intimidate you and police and other people, give us some of the story there.
Well, so basically, we were just standing there peacefully waiting for my wife to come. I was carrying my AR-15, and it's like this, right? Similar to this one. Well, this is not exactly the same one because the AR-15 that I was using has sat in the evidence room since last July. Hopefully I'll get it back one of these days.
Hey, don't count on it. Being government means never having to say you're sorry.
I guess, yeah. Well, so luckily, before they ended up taking that other one, I had just built this one. So I was prepared, I guess, in that sense. So what happened, was that we were just peacefully minding our own business, and all of a sudden, one cop comes up and starts demanding things of us. I wasn't as well educated on that at that point in time about, whether I have to talk to the police or not. And, pretty soon there's 6 police officers standing near us, right? Sort of trying to, make us feel uncomfortable.
Hold on,
right?
You glossed over a very important point there, if I may, just for the audience's benefit, for those that aren't familiar with this. When Peter says, not familiar with whether or not I have to talk to the police, you never have an obligation, ever, to say anything to a police officer. It's a very important legal right to remain silent, but also to know that you don't have to answer questions. You can interact with a cop politely and say, how are you doing, officer? I'm a pleasant human being, and I'm well-grounded and centered. You have nothing to worry about. I choose not to answer any more of your questions, or I don't answer questions. And if you don't have that confidence, of course, it's better to simply keep your mouth shut, right, Peter?
Right, absolutely. And in this case, I was just, as I say, I didn't really know that much about it. So, I was kind of answering questions and so on. And eventually they're starting to pressure me into giving ID, which I really didn't want to do because I didn't feel it was pertinent. And then, what followed that, right, was that some woman who apparently had come by in sort of, I think I know who it was. She was acting sort of officious when she passed by us. And, she went around the next day. She apparently spent the whole next day going around trying to find a TV station to make a story out of this, that there was a man with an AR-15, peacefully in the airport.
Be afraid.
Yeah. So I was just...
What was her role? What was her actual role at the airport?
Her role?
Yeah.
Well, I think she was just a passenger.
Oh, I thought you were implying like she was some kind of airport employee.
No. It was just a passenger, but she had a very officious attitude.
Authoritarian personality disorder type?
Maybe something like that, yeah. So I was pretty displeased by all of this, actually. And months went by. And finally, we were actually visiting Minnesota last July. And when we returned from Minnesota, the TSA confiscated my son's shampoo, right, because of their stupid 3-ounce rule.
You know, I was shocked. I put up a video of them stealing my toothpaste.
Right.
And that got 25,000 views. I guess this is a common experience that people can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. They're just constantly taking this stuff because they have these silly rules. So after I got home after that, I said to my wife the next morning, you know what, I'm really mad about this because, when they confiscated the shampoo, I said, well, look, you're a government agent taking my property. I want a receipt. They refused to give me a receipt. So then I called the local police and I asked them to arrest the guy for petty larceny, but they wouldn't do it.
Of course.
Okay. So I was really very offended and upset by that. Okay. And just in general, I've always kind of been an opponent of the TSA ever since they were started. I mean, they're just, an outrage. So the next morning, I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to take my AR-15. I'm going to go back down, and I'm just going to walk around the terminal peacefully, minding my own business. I'm going to pass right next to the TSA checkpoints and go home, right? And my purpose, in a sense, was as essentially an emphatic protest, if you will, about this kind of attempt to intimidate us out of our rights,
Well, if I may, it's even a higher level of protest, as in a very straightforward assertion of a right that others are trying to infringe upon.
Right. They're trying to take it away. And what I did, that day in July then, Adam, was, I brought my AR-15. I entered the airport. I passed next to the TSA checkpoints, and I actually walked the entire distance of Terminal 4, which, if you know Phoenix Airport, is a very long way. So I would estimate it took probably, somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, where I was walking along the one side. And while I was doing that, I didn't notice any major disturbance of any kind. I mean, most people didn't even notice I was carrying the AR-15. The people who did notice, some of them, kind of nodded approvingly. Others were kind of like, But, nobody running and screaming or, or running in the other direction or anything of the sort. So then I went to the Starbucks there, since gun carriers are so welcome at Starbucks. And
well, hold on, we got to explain that too. Are you referring to where they used to have a specific open carry policy, and then they took out full-page ads in newspapers nationwide and said, "No guns welcome anymore, please."
Yeah, you're not welcome to carry your firearms, but we're not prohibiting it either.
Right.
So
we're not gonna turn down a man coming to a store with a gun demanding coffee.
Right. Well, so I went to the Starbucks and ordered a hot chocolate, and as far as I could tell, pretty much I was served normally. I think maybe one or two people passing behind me noticed I was carrying this. I don't think the server noticed until actually she had given me my hot chocolate, and so then I was exiting the Starbucks when a whole bunch of police came running up to me, kind of in a trot. Okay, one of them with an AR-15 and low ready.
Now,
right.
Low ready. This is a ready, alert, tactical position of like I am a quarter of a second away from taking a shot at you.
Right. Exactly.
And to be clear, you had your rifle slung over your back, muzzle down, correct?
I had it slung by my side, muzzle down.
Okay.
So it's often called patrol carry.
Right. Yep.
Right. So I had it slung muzzle down, and they came up to me, and started demanding, what are you doing? What are you meeting someone? What's going on? And I had educated myself a little bit prior to going down there this time. So, I just said, well, actually, I'm just going to go over there to that checkpoint and take a look at it. And they said, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, excuse me, why not? Isn't the division between the, the non-secured area and the secured area, that line on the floor over there? I really don't understand.
No, it's the buffer of our fears in a general area around anything having to do with airplanes.
Right, that might be fearful to somebody. So the police officer at that point actually said, no, you can't go there. The line stops with me right here, right now. So I said to him, well, am I being detained? And he's like, yes. I'm like, well, okay, Officer O'Sullivan, how can I help you? And then this conversation started amongst the police. One of them asked me, well, can we retain your firearm for the duration of this encounter for the safety of all parties? And, I politely told them that, no, I would prefer to retain my own firearm.
Now, I want to see someone on video trying this to a cop when a cop comes and talks to you and asks for ID. Because this would be far more appropriate for you to say, you know what, officer, I'd be happy to listen to any questions that you might have for me. But before, we take this encounter any further, for the safety of everyone involved, I'm going to have to hang on to your firearm and your taser and your pepper spray and the shotgun and the AR from your vehicle and the the little armored vehicle that you have down at the department. Why don't you turn that over to civilian control? And then for the interest of the safety of all parties involved, maybe then we can talk.
Actually, I probably will try that next time, Adam. Thanks for the suggestion. So they started this discussion about, well, isn't this the same guy who was here last year? So finally they were like, well, what's the plan? We have to have a plan. And I said, well, my plan is to finish my hot chocolate. So at this point, they obviously weren't doing anything. So I said to them, well, am I being detained? There was no answer. I said, well, do you have any reasonable suspicion I'm about to commit a crime? No answer. Finally, I just said, am I free to go? There was no answer, so I walked away from them. So at this point, 6 police officers start following me down the terminal. Now with the 6 police officers, now we see the people getting up and leaving their lunch and moving the other way.
Because police are alarming. An individual armed citizen generally is not and should not be. People should be more alarmed by the cops.
Not as alarming as 6 police, one of them carrying an AR-15 and the others with their hands either on their weapons or with them pulled.
Well, I think a lot of people who saw that going down reasonably assumed that someone was about to commit a crime, probably someone in a blue costume.
Right, yes. So we walked all the way down the terminal again, quite a ways, and I got to the other checkpoint that I was going to take a look at, and I turned and I asked the police, I said, well, how close do you advise I can approach this? And they said, well, yeah, actually, you can go up to the line. We just don't want to see any operational interference. So I went up and I looked in. I was actually looking at the different kinds of scanners that are still deployed, right? Because all the X-ray scanners, the backscatter X-ray, scanners are supposed to be out of the major airports at this point. So after I checked that, I turned and I started back, and I was heading over to find a seat to sit down and finish my hot chocolate, and the police start sort of making a sarcastic remark. They're like, well, do you mind if we hang with you for a while to protect your rights and all? So I told them, well, no, gentlemen, you're perfectly welcome. So I looked for a line of seats where all the police could sit down, and I found a row there, and I went over to the row of the seats, and when hold on.
I want to save the audience a little spoiler here, but this whole time you still have the officer with the AR-15.
I think I had lost a couple of them actually. So by the time we got to the other end of the terminal, I think the count of the police directly following me was down to 3.
Okay.
And I don't believe any of them had the AR anymore.
Okay.
So apparently they had become a little bit more comfortable with the fact that I obviously meant no harm.
Which is an important point here, because they had already realized that. They had already established that, and they had proven from their tactical positioning that they did not believe this man to be a threat in any way whatsoever.
Right. So at this point, I went over to this row of seats where I felt there was enough room for everybody to sit down if they wanted to really hang out with me, right? Maybe I'm too polite. So as I approached, I realized I wanted to rotate the muzzle of my firearm. I wanted to rotate it muzzle up, so when I sat down, I could set it on its buttstock so it'd be more stable and less likely to fall over and endanger anyone.
And this is a normal firearms safety practice.
I think so. If you're going to set it down, it's more stable on the buttstock, that's for sure. So some people who have been in battle tell me that, no, they've sat down with their muzzle down, but I think it's a little bit more exceptional.
There are certain situations where you can go either way. However, if you are going to put a rifle down, muzzle down, you have to ensure that it's not going to slide around or slip, and it's more likely to fall that way. You put it down on the butt, the barrel is facing straight up. It's not a threat to anyone.
Right, and that was my intention. I wanted to be very safe about it. I noticed across the way as I approached the seats, and I was thinking of performing the rotation, I noticed that there were people over there in a TSA checkpoint, so I thought, well, I certainly don't want to be rotating the muzzle in a direction that would face anyone. So then I looked to the right, and as I scanned to the right, I found a spot where there were no people in line, and at that point then I immediately rotated the muzzle so that it would be up, turned around, and sat down, and set the rifle down on its buttstock, and started to drink my hot chocolate. And this is the part you can actually see in the video, that's online of me that was on all the news stories. And so at this point, a curious conversation began amongst the police officers where they started saying things like, this needs to stop now. How are we going to get this guy? What can we arrest him for? Let's see, endangerment, that went on for a while. And finally, one police officer literally said to the other officer, go ask those people over there if they would be willing to be a victim.
I just want to point out that line in and of itself is stunning and so revealing of the nature of government, a solution looking for a problem.
Right. And, my suspicion is that what happened probably was a combination of two things, I suspect, right? One thing is they realized that before they could do anything, I had rotated the firearm, right? And this may have been somewhat disturbing to them, the idea that, here they were just following me and I had just executed this act and they weren't tracking it, right? And the other thing may have been involved is, sort of a feeling of who is this guy, right? He has the temerity to just sit down while we're all sitting here and following him.
Well, there's something that's a very good point. I think there's something even deeper in the psyche of every cop that there is a warped incentive system, whether they know it or not. They understand at some level that they are part of a monopoly, that
yes,
they're the only good guys. And even if it's just an ego thing, yeah, we want to be the ones that you call when you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. Well, when someone else asserts, no, you know what, I'm going to be able to defend myself. I'm not going to call 911. I'm going to call the police afterwards to write a report. Like, that's most of what they're good for anyway. So, yeah. And sorry, like, we're going to reduce, a citizen asserting their right to self-defense in any form is a threat to an officer who is part of this monopoly, threat to their job, who wants to say, no, I'm the only guy who can apply force justly in this society, who can go after criminals. And so
right.
There's ego involvement here as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the data just completely belie that notion, right? I mean, the saying, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. I mean, it's literally true. Right? I mean, your average response time is maybe here in Metro Phoenix, 7 minutes or something like that. I mean, if you're being violently attacked in 7 minutes, you're dead. Well, so so the interesting part about all this, right, was, they essentially were just kind of looking for an excuse, right?
Now, there is one thing that is really shocking about this, because we know how this ends. They found an excuse.
Right.
But what's shocking is that it took so darn long. I mean, politicians have given cops all of these laws and all of this legal impunity so they can arrest people at any time for any reason, because they're disturbing what were you a threat to? You were a threat to the ability of the government to maintain its monopoly, to keep the propaganda and the fear going. And I'm surprised they didn't just walk up to you and say, "Excuse me, sir, you're under arrest for disturbing the peace," or like have like you said, endangerment, whatever it was they were discussing that they could have made up. They don't need a victim. They make themselves the victims. I felt threatened as a cop, so I can shoot anybody I want.
Well, I was told, I think Arizona is a constitutional carry state. We've had open carry since statehood, and certainly we had open carry in the territorial days. So, I think it is a more firearms-friendly place. I mean, it's rated by Guns and Ammo, as the #1 gun-friendly state. But there's still kind of this vestigial attitude that people have that they get afraid when they see somebody in the airport, right?
Mm-hmm,
and then they're trying to somehow make their fears become your problem, right?
Yeah.
And as I said in this op-ed piece, right? There's really kind of three key fears that are involved here, right? I mean, one is just kind of this fear of a particular firearm, like an AR-15, right? That somehow this gun, right, is more evil than a handgun, right? And statistically speaking, the thing I find very offensive as a scientist is that This is just statistical nonsense. I mean, there's 49 times more crime committed with a handgun than with a rifle. And even the New York Times recently published this piece, right, the assault weapons myth, okay, in which they acknowledge that this vilification, if you will, of particular firearms, so-called assault weapons, is just utter nonsense.
And so what are the other fears that you address that you want people to at least be able to challenge as a result of your activism?
Right, yeah. Well, the other one is a fear of open carriers, okay? So, there's also this notion that, oh my gosh, how could you possibly openly carry a gun, rather than say concealed carry? Can't you just conceal carry? And, it turns out, right, again, that open carriers, by and large, as well as concealed carriers who have a permit, we know, are very law-abiding, peaceful people. Right. They're actually about 10 times less likely to commit any crime than the average citizen.
And it should be perfectly obvious that someone carrying a firearm openly doesn't have is not nearly as likely to be having some nefarious intent as someone who's carrying it concealed. Now, obviously, there are lots of people who do both perfectly safely and asserting their right to self-defense.
Right.
But you don't see a guy strolling around open carrying right before robbing a bank, or mugging somebody. It doesn't happen.
No, and in fact, criminals want to hide the weapon, right? Why would they want the attention that open carry invites?
Right.
And all of it has virtually never happened, okay, in a mass shooting or something, that the person was peacefully strolling around with their weapon and then suddenly turned into a mass killer. Like if you look at Paul Ciancia, who, was involved in the shooting at LAX, he carried his rifle in a gym bag until he was in the middle of the TSA line, and then took it out and opened fire. So by the time he saw it, it was too late, right? So, and then finally the third fear, Adam, is this thing about the TSA and this idea, essentially, and I think it is a deliberate attempt, really, on the part, certainly, of the TSA, as well as perhaps other aspects of our government, to essentially justify their existence by trying to make people think it's extremely dangerous in an airport or on an airplane. And, this was a point I was trying to make the gentleman I was discussing with in the line on the airplane later, that your odds of being killed in any terrorist attack are 1 in 20 million years of life. Okay, substantially lower than being killed by lightning.
Well, what I like to point out is that you're 8 times more likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist. And so we do have to issue a little correction here, because just a minute ago, we said that open carriers don't commit random acts of violence. There is one kind of open carrier who regularly commits random acts of violence, often not entirely random, but, spurred on by their either racial disdain for their victims, or for their victims saying something unpleasant, or not simply doing everything they say, and that's cops, obviously.
Right, yeah. People with badges are much more dangerous than the people without the badges, actually. So So the idea, that we have to somehow be particularly afraid, right, of somebody carrying an AR-15 or a handgun openly in the airport, that somehow we should be particularly afraid of such a person, it's just completely counterfactual. There's just much more important things to worry about. And in fact, the TSA is actually a public health hazard, okay, because the inconvenience in travel, which they create, okay, causes people to displace from doing short-haul flights. So an example would be Phoenix to L.A. A lot of people would drive that nowadays rather than flying it. And there's been a 7% decrease in short-haul flights over the last 2 decades. And it turns out that driving is 167 times more dangerous per mile than flying. So if you work out the numbers, the TSA is probably, by virtue of this displacement, causing an excess of 500 deaths on the highway every year.
That's something I figured out a long time ago when I realized and it's common sense, not that this is anything special, but yeah, you add in the cost of all the time and the hassle for a short-haul flight. You weigh the price of the ticket and all the inconvenience and the time versus the cost of driving. And all of a sudden, the potential of using flight technology for this amazing idea of going short distances just is no longer viable. So you alluded to the next incident that you had at the Phoenix airport. Tell us about that story.
Well, so there I was not really trying to make a demonstration at all. I was just trying to go on a Christmas trip with my family to fly to Minnesota. And the TSA, after my demonstration in July, placed me on the SSSS list. Okay, the Selective Secondary Security Screening, which means that every time I go through, I receive, a full pat down. They screen my luggage and do extra, checks on it all. Okay. I've also noticed that it appears, I'm not certain yet, but given the limited number of times I've been in the airport subsequently, but I believe they also usually dispatch a team to my gate. I suppose they just have nothing better to do, so let's keep an eye on this guy, So, we were at the gate, and there were a bunch of TSA people there. We found out later they were actually going to do this ridiculous gate random check thing on passengers. And before I knew that, I had been walking around, and what I do when I see the TSA agents outside their checkpoint is I go up and I take photos of them and I ask them to identify themselves, which they are required by TSA regulations to do. They really don't like doing that. So we have a bunch of people here who are in the business of invading everybody's privacy, who are not willing when they're on duty to say who they are, which is, pretty disturbing and sort of ironic. But I like to go up and I like to say, okay, according to TSA regulations, please state your last name, your badge number, and your rank, which is what they're required to give you. So I was going around. I took pictures, I think, of all of them. And then we were waiting in line, and we were waiting to board. And they started doing this random checking. They didn't actually choose us, but they chose another gentleman who was nearby, and he seemed kind of disgruntled. And as we were going down the jetway, I was trying to kind of start a conversation with him. He was pretty agitated, though. He had actually cut between myself and my wife in the line. He was fairly agitated. I was kind of trying to commiserate with him about the TSA. And at one point I said, as we were getting near the end of the jetway, I asked him a question. I said, well, do you know what your odds are of being killed in a terrorist attack? And after that, he actually started getting sort of aggressive. I actually at one point had to ask him to please calm down because he was acting a little threatening. We got on the plane, no problem. I went back, we sat down. I think I ate a sandwich, and they were continuing to load the plane. And then the stewardess comes down and asks for me by name. And she says, are you Peter and Steinmetz? I'm like, yes, it's me. She says, well, there's two men outside the plane that want to speak with you. So I said, well, who are they? I mean, I'm not in the habit of getting off airplanes to just speak to strangers, right? And she kind of indicated that, they're the TSA. So at first I thought, okay, well, whatever. I'll go talk to them. So I got up and I started out of the plane. And then I realized as I was about halfway to the front that, wait a second, the TSA has no jurisdiction on the plane, right? They have no jurisdiction there. Their jurisdiction ends back at the gate. So I said to the steward, I said, well, actually, I've changed my mind. I'm just going to go back to my seat. If you want, I'll speak to law enforcement. So then they indicated that somebody on the plane was law enforcement, and he said, you have to get off the plane. And I'm like, well, excuse me, are you law enforcement? And he's like, yes. I'm like, are you detaining me? And he's like, yes, I am. And so then he asked me to state my name. And then after that, I said, well, okay, if you're detaining me, what crime do you have a reasonable suspicion I'm about to commit or I have committed? And he said, well, I'm not going to tell you. And I'm like, well, wait a second. How can you be detaining me when you don't have any kind of articulable suspicion? And at this point, then I asked him to identify himself. He refused to do that. Then I asked my son to take a picture of him for identification. But before that happened, the captain came back and he said, look, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm the captain of the plane. I want you to exit in the front. And I said, okay, well, it's your ship, I guess. So, all right. So then I exited. There were no TSA agents there. So, I haven't really gotten a complete answer. Delta Airlines has confirmed that it was one of their employees who made the request and the decision to have me taken off the flight. They would not go into any further detail. So my suspicion is that, some, ground crew member or something in the jetway heard me ask this question of the other passenger and then panicked, right? He's a terrorist. So, we have these boogie words now.
Bomb, 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 bomb.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I mean, it's ridiculous, right? I mean, it's very different if you're asking a question like, what are your odds of being killed in a terrorist attack versus I am a terrorist or, I'm a terrorist about to attack, or so. I mean, there's a difference between asking a generalized question and making a threat.
Because this is how terrorists get caught, right?
What's that?
This is how terrorists get caught. They brag about what they're about to do while going through security checkpoints. Yeah, sure.
Right. Yes. So it's very important that if anybody mentions the word bomb or terrorist, that we immediately kick them off the plane.
All right. So back to the original story. You're sitting there drinking your cocoa. What's the excuse that they come up with, and what legal situation does that lead to for you?
Well, they arrested me on 2 counts of disorderly conduct with a weapon, which is felony class 6 in the state of Arizona. Since it involved an AR-15, they can allege that it is a dangerous nature offense with mandatory prison time.
And they still have these charges pending against you right now?
No, we actually have an agreement with the prosecutor not to charge me.
So it's like he's holding off. He's like he could charge you at any time. But how did you? How did you just come to this agreement?
Well, because the evidence was so weak, right? So, I mean, my attorney went to them and said, look, for the first thing, apparently the prosecutor finally said, they technically did what's called scratch the case. So as soon as I was, booked into jail, right, then I was taken before the judge, my bail was stated, and, it turns out, interestingly, this is another interesting fact, you cannot pay your bail with cash in the Maricopa County Jail at this point in time.
Tell me they're demanding gold or silver, right?
Right, or Bitcoin. No, they want, a bail bondsman's thing or a money order. It turns out this is contrary to Arizona law, actually, quite clearly. But that's sort of an aside.
You mean government breaks the law? Yeah, dude, that's just an aside in America these days. We've totally come to understand and expect this is normal.
Well, we're not actually going to let it be an aside, actually. I have actually filed a notice of claim to sue the sheriff over this. Because this caused me, my wife came down with cash to pay the bail, but wasn't allowed to pay it with the cash. And so I ended up spending the night in jail. I should have been bailed out that evening.
Well, so tell us now, what would you like people to take away from your activism? What purpose, what greater goal do you hope for it to contribute to? And how do you hope that other people get engaged?
Well, I mean, I think, we need to peacefully demonstrate and defend our rights, okay? And, in my case, I certainly hope that we'll see other people basically taking on these irrational fears and doing demonstrations that, look, we are a free people. We are allowed, okay, to carry a weapon for our own defense. And, that was kind of the point I was trying to make. It's like, look, we're not a bunch of sheep who have to go through the cattle guards for the TSA. We're a free people, okay? So, I think that's the main point that I would want people to take away. And I hope that we can inspire some additional activism now as time goes on.
And what's the best way for people to keep up with you, Peter?
Actually, I post almost all of my political items and activism on my Google Plus page. So it's just Peter N. Steinmetz on Google Plus.
Ladies and gentlemen, Peter N. Steinmetz leading the charge for gun rights activism in the Republic of Arizona.
Okay, that was from Adam Kokesh on YouTube. This is, like I was saying, it's an example of one interaction with law enforcement making someone go, you know what, I'm going to keep pushing this issue because I didn't engage in the controversy. I was doing what I had a right to do, and I've never had a problem, and all of a sudden, we're having to deal with this. And once it starts affecting people, they tend to activate, start questioning things more. And it turns people basically into activists, which I wish more people would become active. So many people are not worried about politics, which you can claim either way on that. but they also don't become active in discussions or society. Um, they rather just sit at home and watch football or basketball. Well, all the above. Um, they literally just go from season to season and really don't have a comprehension on monetary policy, economics, anything that could affect their life. But you bet they start becoming angry when all of a sudden, oh, maybe they can't go get a 2 liter of their favorite pop to watch their football game anymore. They only sell them in 20 ounces. And 20 ounce costs more than what the 2 liter costs. And they can't afford the Cheetos because there's a fat tax, even if you're not fat. When things like that start affecting some of these people, and I'm not saying all people, I know people that watch sports, but they're also very involved in philosophy, economics, all kinds of different wide ranges of discussion and topic and belief. And I wouldn't bash anybody just because they watch. I personally don't watch sports. I personally feel it's a waste of my time. It kind of, it's a time filler that I'm not willing to fill my time in with. I feel like I don't have enough time in a day or a week or a morning anymore. But it's something that things like this are pure examples of how government will screw themselves over. Because the farther you push the line, the more people you're going to end up affecting. Of course, their goal more than likely will be, well, we'll have most of them in prisons, so it won't matter. Which they almost are going to accomplish in the near future if we don't reverse our course there. Definitely with nonviolent crimes. And, you think about nonviolent crimes. When does your nonviolent activity, whether it be you by yourself or you and someone else making a voluntarily exchange, you voluntarily exchange services or goods for money or other goods or services. Think about that, and then think about, well, what happens when your normal activity is now illegal? Something maybe you've done your whole life and it's a part of your culture, your life, whatever. That's basically what is happening already. The prison industrial complex is definitely grown at a amazing rate. And that's also a sign that countries headed towards a collapse, because you also look at we've really become an empire instead of a nation, and who even needs nations? We'll get into that later. But there's always going to be people that carry on the ideology. I think a rebuilding of a society with enough people that understand what freedom and liberty and how valuable that is to a society, not a nation, not a country, not an empire, but a society. The social interacting of people. And how that allows a society to prosper and people to prosper on, the own fruits of their labor and their own character. Um, you you have to prepare for the worst, and when a society would collapse, we want as many freedom loving individuals. We don't want all the bad people to people that are there to conquer and destroy. We want the people that are there to build and prosper. And society collapse, it can become chaos, whether it be a natural disaster collapse. Just look at what happened with Katrina. All these situations can cause panic and leave families in situations that can leave them helpless. And I don't ever want to be helpless, so I'm a constant prepper. I personally try to prep as much as possible. And, every time I see more signs and more signs, it reassures that even, if something major doesn't happen, I'm prepared for if it does. I rather it not happen. I rather some crazy violent event never did happen. And it's one of those things, though. I rather have the stuff and it not happen than it happen and not have the stuff. That's why I trust My Patriot Supply. I give a little plug here. My Patriot Supply is where I get my non-GMO seeds and other preparedness items, mainly my seeds. So they have a great selection of non-GMO seeds, and there's other things I get. They got stove in a can. They, other things like that. But I love. I got the green thumb. I like growing my own food. And I had a friend that passed away that used to also grow food for me, and he had 100 acres, so it made it pretty easy to buy large amounts of seeds and put a pretty large garden in. But non-GMO seeds, I want to know what I'm getting, and My Patriot Supply really gives you the information to show that they are tracking and testing their seeds before they send them out, so that you know what kind of quality that they are giving you. If you want to buy some non-GMO or any other prepping supplies for My Patriot, if you go to antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot, you will be purchasing the same items, same great price. I know they have the seed vault for $29.95, I believe. And at the same time, you'll be helping out alternative media like Anti-Tyranny News and this broadcast here and the website. All this takes money to run. Just the internet connection, $100 a month or more. That's not including everything else that goes into this. And we are trying to finalize and expand Anti-Tyranny News to bring you news 24/7. And I've been working pretty hard trying to get all this situated. We've been having quite a bit of problems with the feed and everything. And I've been trying to work with the website, IT people, trying to figure this out. But once that's finalized, I am going to be posting at least one article every day, if not more. But I'm hoping 6 months that we will be having articles 7 days a week, multiple. And I'm also trying to get out to Liberty Fest, New York City, out in Brooklyn this year. I believe it's in October. And I also want to get out to Porcupine Festival out in New Hampshire and get some interviews and really be able to bring more liberty oriented stuff, exclusives, and try to create a media platform that even if we don't have all the special effects and the, you know, $1 million sets and everything, we can bring you high quality information in a way that can still compete. And you know, everything I'm doing right now, I'm basically doing out of pocket, but every purchase you make at My Patriot Supply through that link, anti-tyrannynews.com/My Patriot, it helps us out, and we'll be able to continue to bring you things. You know, thinking, when was it? I'm trying to think of the first episode here on UCY. I believe it was in October of 2012. So we're going on year 3 here on UCY. And, you know, we weren't sure where UCY was going to go. You know, it started off with just a few shows, and then it continued to start growing and more listeners. And UCY has given me and other hosts on this network a great platform that takes a lot of the hassle out of what we would have to do, even if we went to something like Blog Talk. The amount of work that's went into UCY, it really takes time, effort, and Jules, the network owner, she has put long days, long hours into this. And a way you can help UCY continue to grow is by going to ucy.tv not forward slash, but go to ucy.tv, and there is a UCY store tab that takes you to UCY's Amazon store. You get the same great deals, and you get it from someone that a lot of people do business. You more than likely have bought things through Amazon. It's the same experience. UCY, though, their store, they have put together one of the best collection of prepping items that I've seen on any type of even prepping website. Everything from, just regular camping type gear to more extreme prepping gears, and even radiation. We don't know exactly what is going to happen in the future, but we know that there are multiple possibilities. And with things like Fukushima happening, radiation is something that we need to take serious. Not just, some crazy dictator with a nuclear weapon, but we have nuclear power plants. And when you see things like Fukushima, it brings it back to, realization what can happen. And radiation prepping is vital, I think, for any prepper pack. Even if it's the basics, at least have that. Again, go to ucy.tv, click the UCY store tab, and you'll be buying through Amazon. And at the same time, you'll be helping out networks like UCY. And, it's something that it's hard for a lot of these networks to operate when you have things like Blog Talk, where you have all kinds of people, but this network is definitely unique. UCY on YouTube. Check them out there. You can get all the shows that are archived right there. Also at ucy.tv on any of the show pages that you'll have the archive for those shows. And if you are a host and you're looking for a home for your show, go to ucy.tv and click the contact tab and get a hold of Jules and see if you could arrange something. We're always looking for new talent out there that can bring facts to the table to show the truth to the people out there and let them make their own decision on the facts that we know. Okay, getting back into the news here. I have one, it's been called out, and this is perfect example of government basically working for something other than your well-being. And this is from the freethoughtproject.com. Police promise to extort, kidnap, or lock you in a cage for warming up your car. In Roland Park, Kansas, recently a number of U.S. states, or that's where this article is out of. Recently, a number of U.S. states police have been writing people tickets for letting their cars warm up in the morning. Not only are police extorting people from this common practice, but they have also been rummaging through people's vehicles as a demonstration to show them how easily someone could steal their cars or belongings. Ironically, the laws are said to be intended to prevent thieves from breaking into cars while the police are doing the job for them instead. In Roland Park, violators could face up to $125, and in just a 2-hour time span last week, one officer wrote 9 tickets to people who had their cars running. Officer John DeMoss of Kansas spoke to reporters about how he rummaged through vehicles without the permission of the owners. Your car can be stolen in a matter of seconds. During my recent enforcement, I did stop and go up to the vehicles and look inside the car or open the door, and a lot of times the owner of the car never came outside to contact me and say, "What are you doing around my car?" That's plenty of time for someone to steal your vehicle, DeMoss said. Not only is the law itself a violation of free choice and personal responsibility, but this cop just blatantly admitted to searching people without permission. This omission was entirely overlooked by the local news source that broke the story. Instead, they went into stolen car statistics in an attempt to give support to this insane law. Sadly, Kansas isn't the only place where laws against warming up your car. It's also illegal in Texas, Maryland, Ohio, West Virginia, Colorado, Wisconsin, South Carolina, as well as several cities in Minnesota. Other states like Alaska have similar laws, but they are targeted at emissions instead of car thefts. The fines that people receive for the offense vary from state to state. And here is a clip from that local news affiliate about the cop where he talks about rummaging through people's car without their permission.
And days like this, there's nothing worse than firing up your engine and then freezing the entire way to work. It's warm when you pull in the parking lot.
Yeah, right. Your hands are practically freezing to the steering wheel if you forget your gloves. And it's no secret that some or many of us prevent that by letting the car warm up before hitting the road.
Yep, but guess what? Sarah Hollenbeck spent some time with Roland Park police officers and found out that split-second decision might cost you 125 buckaroos. Right, Sarah?
That's right. It's completely illegal in the state of Kansas, and all of us are guilty of it. So we have snow on our windshield, and we have to obviously find a way to get it out of there. So we warm up the car, we try and get all the snow out, but just doing that alone, if you leave your car running, that is going to cost you. And here in Roland Park, they are doing huge stings this winter because they have had so many cars that are stolen here. Yesterday, we had the pleasure of going out with one of the officers as he was cracking down on these vehicles. We went along with them as they cruised through several neighborhoods looking for running cars. Once they spot one, an officer jumps out of his vehicle and checks to see if the keys are in the ignition. Last week, in just 2 hours' time, one officer wrote 9 tickets and gave 4 warnings. Officer John DeMoss says they're not trying to bully drivers, but they are trying to keep thieves at bay.
It's a matter of seconds. During my recent enforcement, I did stop. I'd go up to the vehicle, look inside the car, open the door. A lot of times the owner of the cars never came out and contacted me and said, hey, what are you doing around my car or anything like that. That's plenty of time for somebody to steal your vehicle.
And this happens more often than you think. This year alone, just from January 1st to February 4th, they have had 38 cars stolen here in Johnson County. And that number is even bigger if we think about it in last winter's entire time. Most of those cars were stolen from Overland Park. That's the biggest city that we're seeing these thefts. But last winter alone, we saw, if you can see it here, 60 cars that were stolen in Johnson County alone. Lindsay?
I love that you wrote on the windows. I love that. Okay, so Sarah, a lot of people at home wondering, what happens if you have a remote start? Do you get a ticket too?
Well, that is the good news. If you have remote start, you are okay. But if you have your keys in the ignition, like ours is right now, that's going to cost you regardless if your doors are locked or not. Reporting live in Roland Park, I'm Sarah Hollenbeck, 41 Action News.
All right, Sarah, thank you.
So, not only are they doing something that could potentially be illegal anyways for them to do, cops shouldn't be able to walk on your property at all without a permit or a warrant, or you permit them to come on your property. That's why he was at a apartment complex in the video that you couldn't see. Another thing isn't that a little discriminatory? My vehicle, my glove box locks, my trunk completely locks. I can put a valet key in the ignition, start my car warming up, and lock the doors. But that would be illegal there. But someone with a remote start would be okay. The main issue, though, is these people are basically being punished for warming up their cars because of what a criminal might do. You're not allowed to warm up your car because a bad person might take it. Now, what kind of sense does that make? Now, this is just another example of a way for government to extort you and giving the cops excuses to rummage through your car, breaking law, and potentially come across something that they didn't even have the right to find. Now, like I tell people, you'd be about an idiot to keep anything in your car anyways. There's, people that smoke, that's their choice, and carry around in your car. And you're not in a state that you're allowed to have it, you might be in a little bit of trouble. And, that's a risk that you take. I recommend being more of someone that helps try to get legislation in your state and passed to decriminalize. Now, I'm not a big proponent of legalization. I've kind of made it clear that I think legalization is only a solution that they've had from the beginning. That, well, we understand that this isn't going to work, and eventually it's going to be reversed. But then we'll be able to legalize it and tax it, just like we did to alcohol. And that seems to be the way even corporations like to try to get their monopolies set up a lot of times. And, you know, I could see it happening with marijuana in states that they're legalizing it. Eventually, they'll have feds step in and go, okay, now we're going to federally legalize it. But for them to operate, they're also going to need a federal permit. And we're only going to give out this many. And states need to just go along with it. And you'll see states that will end up taking some type of grant money that comes with ties to, you know, you have to also go along with this permit program that we have. And then you'll see the big corporations that already are looking into things like this probably take a hold. You know, I see that eventually being tried with which I think they've been working on this for a while, but any type of vitamin C or anything like that, any type of supplement will eventually be banned, illegal, and then permitted and legalized more as a pharmaceutical thing. Then you'll have to be prescribed vitamin C. So, you know, government always finds a way to extort money and monopolize. Whether it be, well, it's through a corporation, which a lot of the people in government are parts of corporations, or have some type of investment tied to it. And we see it over and over. And kind of feed on to the next topic and article I want to go on to. You know, who are the people that are the most successful at helping things like this go along? Mainstream media, maybe? And we've recently had quite a bit of memes and articles about Brian Williams and his lie about the chopper. It's one of those things that we know that these are propaganda. I think it's really just tools to try to expose the propaganda of the people that don't quite believe it. And I have one here from We Are Changed, Luke Radowski, The Real Scandal with Brian Williams Lies. And this touches on the propaganda side of it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and cue this up here.
Military veterans were saying he is full of crap. And of course, he had to admit it recently, and just admitted a story where he was perpetrating the Iraq war in 2003. He said he was in a helicopter that went under RPG fire. Well, some of the soldiers that were with him called him on his bluff and said he was full of crap. And then he admitted it. He shared this story on many news outlets, on David Letterman, during speeches, during events, about how he almost died in a military helicopter in Iraq. Well, at least he admitted the story. He still is a sock puppet media hack for the warmongers. But let me tell you why this story doesn't matter. The story doesn't matter because forget about Brian Williams' ego. Let's talk about the bigger issue behind this story. Number one, he was an embedded journalist within the U.S. military, which provides many ethical problems because when you're embedded with the military has to select you, vet you, you go through this progress, and they tell you everything to report. You're under their control, under their discretion, and they get to review everything. You're pretty much a PR person for the war industry, which Brian Williams of NBC, that were perpetrating the lies of WMDs, of the ruling establishment, he is the one responsible. Media, people don't hold these guys accountable. Now Brian Williams is being held accountable for his ego and his pride, but they need to be held accountable for their war mongering. It is only because the mainstream media manipulates news and information. It's the only reason hundreds and thousands of people are dead and suffering in Iraq right now. This man not only should have egg on his face, but he has blood on his hands. Now, I ran into Brian Williams on 3 separate occasions. One time was during the G20. He was doing a live broadcast. And this is what happened when I saw that he was doing a live broadcast.
About how these private federal reserve banking systems rule this country. Do your job and forget your corporate sponsors. We know that 5 corporations control almost everything we see and hear on mainstream media. We know the mainstream media is a joke. That's why people go on websites like wearechange.org.
It's a cheesy plug. But even on the news, you were able to hear for some reason there were some kind of audio problems. And then on the news on NBC during the national broadcast, during the G20, people heard this.
That's our broadcast for this Thursday night. Thank you for being with us. On behalf of our protester here with the Bullhorn, I'm Brian Williams reporting tonight from Pittsburgh. We hope to see you tomorrow evening back home in New York. Good night.
That went on throughout the whole broadcast, and of course we successfully interrupted him to the point where even my own mother called me and said she heard me on national television. But other than that, I ran into Brian Williams on another occasion. The video hasn't been seen by anybody, but man to man, eye to eye, I met him and I talked to him, and I talked to him about the problems of the media perpetrating war, about things like World Trade Center 7, never questioning authority. And Brian Williams, the man he is, of course, said he has no opinion on that, and he's not paid to have an opinion, and No, I'm not paid to think, because they're not. They're paid to perpetrate lies. They're paid to read scripts. They're paid to look professional, to look like the father figure that he looks like, so you trust him. But this problem of perpetrating war, which should be the bigger issue behind Brian Williams' lie that he has been telling to perpetrate all the horrible things have been happening, is nothing new. And this is what people need to know. This has been going on for a while. Whether it's the USS Maine and the Spanish-American War, there came a situation where William Randolph Hearst, who had major connections with the U.S. government in the 19th century, 112 years ago, openly lied about an incident where a U.S. Navy ship was blown up. He said that the Spanish were attacking us. And of course, this caused a war, outright manipulation of the facts when the USS Maine blew up because of internal problems. We see this manipulation with CNN and the first Gulf War in Iraq. It's not only just lying about WMDs. The first Gulf War in the 90s, in the early 90s, was also full of crap and full of lies. Here is CNN doing a supposed live broadcast behind a green screen, which is blue, a blue screen, but people just call it green screen in the industry, perpetrating like they're under attack. Look at these clowns.
I know we can't be very specific given these restrictions, but within those parameters, what did you see? Well, what I saw, I didn't see anything hit. I looked very almost sort of there was a vapor trail coming from my right to my left, and there's a cloud or something. It looks like it might have been an explosion cloud. The light saying
Look at these clowns. All the mainstream media is just fake bullcrap to perpetrate war. And this is not the only major lie told during the first Gulf War. There was a PR company that took the Kuwaiti's ambassador daughter and made her perpetrate a lie of how the Iraqi government was killing babies in incubators. The story was all manipulated. It was all an outright lie, and the American people, all they heard about was these babies that were murdered by the Iraqi military, and that's why we need to invade them. Of course, they didn't list all the crimes that Saddam Hussein committed with weapons that we gave him. They listed this fake event to emotionally get you into a trauma so you would be for the war. So you would actually support the first Bush president in attacking and invading Iraq. There's a whole bunch of manipulation happening with media. And if you're not familiar, there's also Operation Mockingbird, an open CIA project that infiltrated mainstream media and openly had the CIA manipulating news, creating news that were worked out better for U.S. foreign policy. Top agents were working in the top echelons of the mainstream media in the 70s. And of course, this just goes on, and it's still continuing. Of course, Operation Mockingbird was disclosed. Look it up. Do your own research. The sources in this video will be in the description below, but it continues. There's a journalist in Germany who is a part of the mainstream media there, Eric von die Bick, and he told a story recently of how the CIA put him on the payroll and were giving him stories to post as if they were his. The CIA knowingly is already infiltrating all of the mainstream media. And it's sad seeing people who are supposed to have integrity, people who are supposed to be the fourth branch of the government, who are supposed to hold the government accountable, just cower to power, as we recently saw Vice News when they invited Joe Biden, the irrelevant puppet, the irrelevant politician, into their studios. Look at them. They're like holding hands, groveling over the non-existent power that this stupid icon has, that no one even knows who he is. No one even knows his name. I went to a bar recently and no one even knew who Joe Biden was. Check out the Super Bowl drinking game. I had a lot of fun doing that. It's a great, funny video that you should also watch. But look at him just cowering to authority and power, clapping when he's speaking. And this is not journalism. Even though Vice News portrays themselves as this edgy alternative media group, they are not. They are connected with the State Department, and I know a lot of horrible things about Vice News, not only from one of my friends that work there, but also from the top people who still work there and used to work there. And what Vice News is doing, they're interconnected with a lot of high establishment members with the U.S. government, with the U.S. State Department, and they're also perpetrating a lot of the lies, and they're also willingly participating in this orgy fest of loving any warmongering, authority, manipulative figure like this bozo clown, Joe Biden. And of course, you have to be very skeptical because the government's smart. The CIA knows that many people are finding media hacks like Brian Williams irrelevant. Viewership with Vice News is also going down. But they know people are starting to go online and look for independent news source because the mainstream media is full of crap time and time again. We know that. They perpetrate war. That's who they're working for. That's their main mission. They have blood on their hands. They're the ones most solely responsible for the problems we're dealing with, because if we were properly informed, there would be no freaking war. There would be no support for war. And that's why they're taking to social media. And that's why they're taken to manipulating social media in a way to spread propaganda so their stories could get out even more, because they're knowing, oh, crap, the infiltration of mainstream media doesn't work. Now we have to do social media because that's where the truth is coming out. The German journalist spoke out. He became a whistleblower, how the CIA was manipulating him. There's even FBI agents that infiltrate and impersonate AP reporters and are openly working, sometimes as interns. They're infiltrated on so many different levels. And that's why you see the garbage that you see on mainstream media. And the FBI just admits it. FBI doesn't have as much power as the CIA, but they're still trying to get their hands because they know news is a major power. And of course they want to manipulate the news because if they inform you, they empower you. And they don't want to empower you. They want to keep you in fear. Just like the Iraqi incubator story that was totally manipulated by a PR company. That's what they're doing right now with ISIS. Not mentioning the fact that the U.S. government is funding ISIS. They're not mentioning that very fact. But it's coming out quicker than ever because of social media, which they're trying to get a grasp on because they're trying to manipulate as much as they can. Don't let them manipulate it. Share this video with your friend. Show people what real news is about. Like this video and don't forget to subscribe. We're going to have a lot more video breaking down the propaganda that's being thrown your way. Forget about this egotistical.
Okay, that was We Are Change, wearechange.org, We Are Change on YouTube. The Real Scandal with Brian Williams Lies. Now, when we look at mainstream media and we understand that a lot of people see it as propaganda and just a talking point. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. One thing that we are seeing is a lot of so-called, what should we say, independent news media popping up. And they're not popping up starting out small. They're popping up with, everything in place. And they're basically RT popping up, but the other type of independence. And we see how long it's taken a lot of the true grassroots, independent, small time. And I'm not saying some of the bigger ones aren't, legit. People have made money. But we also see, even with enough money, it's still hard to get independent media off the ground. But when we look at a lot of the independent media, successful, popular independent media out there, it takes a while for them to get off the ground. It doesn't just happen overnight. And we're seeing a lot of sites that they start off looking like, hey, they might be legit, and they're quickly off that page. They're right into puppeting mainstream. And I know from personal, experience that it's really hard to get people that you can trust. You start seeing people that just don't seem to be where you thought they were. Maybe mentally, or they seem to have an agenda that doesn't align with what message they, supposedly believe in. And, I've had a lot of that experience where, you meet people that are talking one way, and then just either information they share or people that they start supporting kind of shows who they really are. I love freedom as long as it's for me and not that group of people over there. And or the famous one, we shouldn't put labels on people and group people up, and we should blame it on that group over there. That one's classic. We tend to find that a lot when you talk about liberty, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, I don't believe those people should have any freedom to voluntarily interact in society. You know, I think the idea of socialism in the context that, you know, the Marxism, the you know, fascism, the communism, that type of government control. That idea, you know, I believe in socialism in the context of the social interacting of people in society. Well, yeah, that's socialism, you know. But when you hear socialism talked about in any type of media form, we're usually talking about government socialism, meaning everyone's equal pay for whatever job you do. So the guy that just sweeps the floors makes as much as the guy that's lifting the crates and sticking them in a truck. It doesn't tend to work out. And then at the same time, government is taking your money before they give it to you, and we'll take 80% of that. And you know, we're headed that way here. I'm definitely, if you're self-employed, double tax, and you know, it's getting out of control. Okay, I am going to move on here. Let's see what I haven't touched on yet. Okay, the last half hour, I'm going to touch on vaccines. That's something I definitely want to cover. I did want to try to cover something else. Let me see what, you know, we'll be able to pop that in there. Okay, this one from Next News Network. We'll end up doing vaccines for the last 15 minutes or so. Before we do that, take a small time for a plug here. Help out alternative media like UCY.TV that gives us a great platform for me and other hosts to hear, to bring you information that mainstream isn't, and giving us the freedom to broadcast what we choose. Alternative media like this needs the grassroots and needs your support. And one way you can do that is by shopping through Amazon. If you go to UCY.TV, click the UCY store, it takes you to UCY's Amazon store, which they have one of the best collection of prepping gear already, you know, put in a central location where it's easy to click, and even radiation preparation gear. And when you go through that link, that also helps and gives UCY a little kickback. And you're buying the products through Amazon at the same price, but UCY gets that little bit of kickback, and that helps keep this network going and helps us expand. And you can also help out Anti-Tyranny when you're looking for precious metals. Amagi metals is one of my favorite, and the only one actually that I use. And they just introduced a tier program. Not only did they already have one of the best, you know, competitive prices when it comes to gold and silver and other metals, they have now introduced a tier program that's going to be going into effect here soon, if not already, that when you buy larger amounts, you will start getting even better deals. So, they were already competitive, and you'll still get, real great prices if you're just buying one at a time. They've always been competitive there. But now, if you're buying bulk, you'll even get cut a little bit better deal. And that's in their gold section. So go to antityrannynews.com/metal, and that'll take you to Moggy Metals, and you'll get the same great price that you would normally get through them. And at the same time, Anti-Tyranny News will get a kickback and allow us to expand and keep our operations going here. I'm going to go into this article here. Next News Network put out one on YouTube and through Next News Network. Schools to begin depression screenings. Make sure there's no...
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I am Link Austin, and this is The Link Austin Show. If you're joining us through the Next News Network or through the Link Austin YouTube channel, thank you very much for being with us today. So we started out the report with that famous clip of the evil Melissa Harris Perry at MSNBC telling us that our children do not belong to the parents. They belong to the state. A perfect commie response and propaganda piece put out by MSNBC. And I have an article that ties directly into that line of thinking, that line of propaganda that the mainstream media is pushing upon all of us. It comes from CBS Channel 4 in Minnesota. Annika Hennepin schools may start depression screenings. Minnesota's largest school district is discussing screening high school students for depression and anxiety in the classroom. Well, of course they are, because they know best. As part of a state grant to improve mental health services, Annika Hennepin schools could offer a screening as soon as next fall. This is led by Dr. Nita Kumar, a mental health consultant assigned to the district. And the school district is considering spending a $370,000 state grant for this testing trial. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is something that is being pushed all across the country. Every time there is a suicide of a teenager or a child at a school, at a public school, they are now pushing that this mandatory anxiety, mental health screening, depression screening, they're pushing that this take place to prevent more suicides. But the thing that they're missing, the information that they're not telling you, is that most of these suicides are a result of these children being put on the same drugs that will most likely be prescribed to your son or daughter should they be found depressed or anxious. Yes, many of you are familiar, for those of you that have children, of the notorious meeting with the teacher or the student psychologist at the school, where they sit you down and tell you that your son or daughter is fidgety in class and that they can't pay attention or that they're talking too much, and that they've deemed them by, of course, these school district paid psychologists or psychiatrists, they've deemed them that they fall under the diagnosis of ADHD or ADD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Yes, they tell you that your son or daughter has a learning disability because they're fidgety in class. Ladies and gentlemen, this is something as old as time. Little boys, little girls, they have lots of energy when they're growing, especially when they're younger. I remember my own self being in school, and I mean, who wants to pay attention? Most of the time, it's not very fun being in school. But the answer by today's society, by the education system, by the pharmaceutical system is what? Drugs. Let's give children as young as 5 and 6 and sometimes younger psychotropic drugs, mood-altering, chemical-altering, imbalancing drugs that will supposedly make your children, your son or daughter, snap out of it and act right. Let's forget the fact that we have essentially removed any sort of physical activity, PE, recess, all of that is going away. And so these kids are stuck inside of a building all day, and we wonder why they're getting fat. We won't get into the GMO foods, but Michelle Obama feels like she can dictate that children only have a serving size of 100 calories a day for lunch, and that's going to suddenly make them not fat. The kids won't even eat the food now because it is so bad. But all of this stems back to that opening video, this line of thinking that the state is going to tell us how to raise our own children. I want to show you the patient health questionnaire that would be sent around to students in 10th grade in Minnesota. I'll pull it up here behind me so that you can see the questions. And as you read down these questions, like feeling tired or having little energy, poor appetite or overeating, trouble concentrating on things, when you read through these questions, and let's point out at the very bottom of the survey that this survey that's used in schools across the country, doctors' offices across the country, it was created by an educational grant from Pfizer. And that's what we're seeing is that this mandatory health screening, these questionnaires, all of this is being pushed by the pharmaceutical company. But that's not the only place and the only reason and the only group that's pushing this. Following the shooting in Sandy Hook, President Obama signed an executive order that provided federal grants to further the agenda of schools being turned into psychiatric clinics. On September 22nd, this is reported from WorldNet Daily, on September 22nd, 2013, Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Sylvia M. Burwell announced a $99 million federal grant to school districts for mental health services. The money will be used to, and I'm reading from WorldNet Daily here, the money will be used to train new mental health providers, help teachers and others recognize mental health issues in youth and connect them to help and increase access to mental services for young people. Let me tell you what that means, ladies and gentlemen. This is an all-out assault, an all-out attack on freedom. It's an attack on the family. It's an attack on society. It's an attack on humanism. What that means is they're going to roll out this program across school districts all over the country where they're going to have teachers and school district paid psychiatric healthcare professionals walking around classrooms, handing out these surveys and trying to single out your son or daughter for ADD or ADHD or depression or anxiety. And then they're going to sit you down in a room, that very notorious meeting, they're going to sit you down in a room and tell you that your son or daughter needs to be on medication. In 2005, Congress actually passed a law, surprisingly, barring school districts from requiring parents from putting their children on these psychotropic drugs because they had ADD or ADHD as a requirement to attend class, because schools were doing that before. And they still try to make parents believe that if you do not put your son or daughter on these ridiculous medications because they fidget around or they're not paying attention, if you do not put them on these medications, that they may not be able to be in class, any normal classroom environment. They really do a good job. And most parents, to their defense, are not educated on this. And that's the main point of this report today, is that we need to wake up parents across the country and across the world. This isn't just happening in America. I'm going to get to a Canadian story in just a minute. They're somewhat advanced for the worse on this in this area of these mental screenings. But we have to wake parents up to, A, the dangers of these drugs being prescribed to basically toddlers and all the way up through teenage years. And of course, adults take them as well. But I'm focusing on children here because they're the most vulnerable and they have someone else making the decisions for them. And you as the parent have to wake up and start reading this information about these awful side effects of these drugs. And I want you to read about the suicides that many believe are a result of these drugs. I want to just read you some of the top drug warnings for ADHD medications. Now, these have been these are sort of aggregated over 44 warnings from 8 different countries on ADHD medications. There's 13 warnings on stimulants, and that's Adderall and Ritalin and those type of drugs causing heart problems. 10 warnings causing mania or psychosis. 9 warnings on these stimulants causing cardiovascular problems. 8 warnings on stimulants causing death. 4 warnings on stimulants causing hallucinations. 4 warnings on stimulants causing depression. There's more warnings on violence, hostility, aggression, seizures, agitation, irritability, anxiety, suicide risk, and attempts. And then, of course, addiction and dependence. So what? What do we do? Well, here's what we do. We start talking, just like I always encourage people. One person talking about this to another friend is all it takes to start getting the ball rolling in the right direction. Because if we don't do this, here's what happens. The New World Order wants total dominance over society. And they want, and it is no secret, that those that subscribe to this New World Order ideology, they want a massive reduction in population. And so they're doing that by these soft kill measures like these psychotropic drugs. Sometimes the drugs themselves kill people. Other times the drugs make people so crazy that they kill themselves. They fill these children and adults with thoughts of suicide, and they end up killing themselves or killing others. And if the drugs themselves don't kill people, if nothing else, they put individuals into a zombie trance. And so you're A, unaware of what's going on, and B, even if you are aware of what's going on in our society, that's all the things that are wrong, you don't care because you're on this medication. So it's time to wake up. It's time to get off of the pills. It's time to realize that children are children. They're going to be bouncing around. They have a lot of energy. They're growing, and they need to run. So the next time your teacher says that your son or daughter is not sitting still in class, how about asking why the school isn't running those kids around outside every day for an hour? How about that as an alternative to fixing this problem? But at the end of the day, there's always going to be fidgeting and, problems with concentration. They're children. They're developing. They're learning. There's a lot of things going on. And not to mention all of the outside stimulants, iPads, iPhones, internet, constant news, constant information. Look around. It's not their fault that.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there and kind of expand on this. You can get that again, and it was about over anyways. Schools to start depression screenings equals big money for Big Pharma. Next News Network on YouTube. But what he was saying is perfectly describing what's going on. And, to expand on that, Big Pharma being the one that's given the grant money for the whole screening to be done. One other thing, that ties into the elitist desire to control, and I believe this also plays into eugenics. We think eugenics is done here in the United States. That was back then. We don't do that anymore. But one of the big vessels of a lot of the eugenics ideology. Was Planned Parenthood, and that's still around. When you look at some of the people behind Planned Parenthood, the Gates family. Oh yeah, Bill Gates is one like second richest, and with what's going on with these vaccines, this whole measles outbreak that, they're sparking all this, more than likely probably originated. Family member went to Disneyland, and they vehemently came out really quick and said, we don't think it was a foreign visitor. We think it was a U.S. citizen that had it. Not knowing, they immediately were coming out trying to say the spin it. And I thought that was funny because when it first broke, out in Disneyland, first thing I thought is it's Disneyland. You're going to get people from other countries that don't get vaccinated that way. Countries and cultures that don't practice that, because even in some countries where, they vaccinate, there's a lot of rural areas that rarely see any medical treatment, and they believe in, they're witch doctors or, medicine men. Even, the more what someone would consider civilized, your definition of civilized could be different, and mine would be a lot different. But let's say, they have a house and they have, they take, motorized transportation, they wear modern clothes, but they still, don't do the modern medicine. But people like that, can travel. We know that there's a lot of people in other countries that their religion won't allow them to do vaccinations. And Disneyland and Disney World both get a lot of foreign visitors. For them immediately come out and insist that they believe it was a U.S. citizen, not a tourist, was kind of sketchy to me. My personal view on that. And they were again pushing it this morning on a lot of the morning shows about the outbreak that we don't know, who was the main starter of it, or if anybody there was at Disneyland, or had a family member that was recently at Disneyland. And they were quoting Autism Speaks. And basically, I'm kind of paraphrasing. It might be pretty close to exactly what they said, but basically saying that there's no evidence, or we don't believe that vaccines have a link to autism, and parents should get full regimen vaccinations for their children, or something to that extent. And I'm thinking, wow, Autism Speaks. I think I've heard that before. And I went online, started looking up, and yeah, that's Autism Speaks is the one I've been seeing a lot of people that have mild autism, and parents of autistic kids that didn't like the organization. And I remember that there were a lot of people raising hell about them not too long ago, and I was like, okay, that's where I heard of them. And I started looking into it, and there was a article at vactruth.com, VAC truth.com, 83 reasons to question Autism Speaks for hiring big pharma scientists. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but first it starts off saying, the big secret finally is out. Autism Speaks made a radical announcement May 9th, 2011. And this was in June of 2011 that this was written. that said Robert Ring, PhD, a scientist from Pfizer, was placed into the newly created position of Vice President of Translational Research. Ring's appointment was made simultaneously with the discovery that 83 cases of vaccine-induced autism were paid compensation secretly by the U.S. government Vaccine Inquiry Compensation Program. And I'm reading the article, and it's going on, and I'm reading, and then I noticed something, and it's in the part of this article that is titled "The Straw That Breaks the Camel's Back." And when I seen this, it just bam, bam, fireworks went off. Right there's your connection to why Autism Speaks would be on mainstream media quickly saying, vaccines have nothing to do with autism. It says here, under the straw that breaks the camel's back, and again, this is truth.com. And it's titled 83 Reasons to Question Autism Speaks for Hiring Big Pharma Scientists. It says here, now that we know the most highly qualified candidate received the position and his role is to facilitate pharmaceutical intervention in autism, shouldn't we take a look at influence? It actually comes subtly from a very pro-vaccine organization. In the fall of 2010, Autism Speaks sent an update to their strategic plan. None other than Bill Gates Sr. handpicked Faye Tversky of the Gates Foundation, as page 2 notes, which it says here, quote, "We wish to express our appreciation to Faye Tversky, Director, Impact and Planning, Gates Foundation, for her generous time and advice. We also wish to thank Bill Gates Sr. for the introduction to Faye and for his ongoing support of individuals with autism and their families." Gates' son, Bill, can be seen calling for everything but Andrew Wakefield's head in the CNN interview. Of course, Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations is almost exclusively funded by the Gates Foundation, which spends many millions vaccinating children worldwide. So the autism group that is quite often the ones that are giving the consulting families with autistic kids. It's again linked to Gates. Vaccines are funded by Gates Foundation. We know this. Worldwide. They also have their hands in GMOs. Recently, I need to find this and go over it. But I seen one of the ladies from Facebook alongside Melinda Gates talking about things they're working on together, Facebook and Gates Foundation. And it had more to do with information getting out. Talking about, making sure the right information is given to the right people. Do you see the mix of everything going on with this? We got the Gates Foundation behind the GMOs, the vaccines, and then after, so many cases about vaccines and autism links, we see that the Gates Foundation is now helping Autism Speaks by, putting one of their people in a position to be influencers. If that's who they're consulting with, it's kind of it would be it would be at odds with what many people with autism or family that think that vaccines are linked to it. Well, they wouldn't be able to trust a group that links themselves with a foundation that is heavily involved in vaccines. I have one here from Ben Swan here before the broadcast ends. We got about 5 minutes. Has the CDC whistleblower been given immunity to speak about vaccines? Derek Burrows from benswan.com. The Daily Caller has reported that Dr. William Thompson has been granted immunity by the Obama administration following the revelation that he was involved in fudging numbers in a study related to vaccinations and autism. Dr. Thompson would later release a statement through his lawyer stating that he had handed related documents to Congressman William Posey's office. According to the Daily Caller, the Obama administration has granted whistleblower immunity to a federal government scientist that claimed that he intentionally omitted information in a study that could have shown a race-based link between vaccines and childhood diseases, including autism. A whistleblower came to our office, Dr. William Thompson. He came forward with the document saying that at CDC he had manipulated one of the studies he was an author on to get a desired outcome. Posey's spokesman, George Sakala, told the DC, the Daily Caller. The study has relation to vaccines and their relationship to autism. Posey staffer Anna Shartner said they reviewed Thompson's statements and documents carefully. We're working with the science committee to get a hearing, Anna said. What we're talking about is integrity with an agency. It's rightfully under the purview of the science committee. And it goes on. What this, shows is that a lot of these studies are purposely manipulated for desired results. What that part of it doesn't say is that I read somewhere that he talked about being coerced to do this. Basically, he went along with it. So it's one of those things that we understand the statistics are being manipulated. And, I also seen on mainstream media where they were talking about, this, any problems with it is so rare. So, it's just so rare. And I was like, really? They really want to go there? It might not be completely like a epidemic where everything just, they wipe out a whole generation. No. But, in cases, a lot of vaccines have killed small populaces of people. But here's one from Infowars.com. We're coming up to end broadcast. The U.S. government has paid out $3 billion to vaccine-injured Americans since 1989. And I'm not going to go read this because we are basically out of time. Here's the music. But you can check it out at Infowars.com. They link to the information. But this is just an example, I believe, of eugenics being practiced in modern day. But that's my opinion, and those are the facts I see them. Take care. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv for a broadcast coming up.